he is a Nastik Darshana. But no, Tukaram himself says that Vedansa to artha amasikata. I know the meaning of Vedas. So he understands Vedas, but what he is opposed, and that's the entire Bhakti Sampradaya did, was to oppose the Kriya Kand, Karma Kand of Vedas, the Yagyas, sacrifices, they opposed. So they fall under neither under Astik or Nastik, they are somewhere in between. And that is what the later on, after 12th century, whatever developments took place, they were somewhere in between, between Astik and Nastik. Therefore, we need to worry about them. Now, Upavedas, these are all applied knowledge. Ayurveda is on health and life. Dhanurveda is warfare. Gandharva Veda is music, poetry, dance. Arthashastra is public administration, governance, economics, polity. And Sthapatya Veda is architecture. And as I said, Upavedas have a connection with the main Vedas. So Ayurveda is connected to Rigveda, Dhanurveda is connected to Yajurveda, Gandharva Veda is Samaveda, and Arthashastra and Sthapatya Veda are connected to Atharva. So that's the way we understand the formal Indian knowledge system. Now, 64 Kalas is also a part of that formal education system, formal knowledge system. And these are related to the arts and techniques. Now, there are 64. Go onto the internet and find out 64 Kalas and you'll get a list. I just got some part of it. Sangeet, Gayan, Pushpastran, that is spreading flowers, hair decoration, dance, given half shloka, you can complete the whole shloka. Knowledge of omens and signs, hypnotism, teaching of good behavior, identifying pearls. Then we can see many of them preparing panaka like juice, designing valuable jewels. Then Indrajala, playing Veena. There are 64 kalas have been defined. They have not been well documented what each one really mean. Then learning animals and birds' way of living, creating different kinds of flower decorations. Sugandha Dravya Rachana, that is Gandha Yukti, Rupya Ratna Pariksham, examining silver. You can see there are plenty, developing, preparing medicines. Then you have knowledge about the thread games, creating poems, reading books, and so on and so forth. You can keep listing them. Knowledge of puzzles and knowledge of cleaning hair. So many things. What it signifies is that on one hand, you have the bookish knowledge, which is given by those 18 Vidyas, and 64 Kalas is relating to the skills. So that is what we need to understand. These skills, if you take these 64 skills, then you can group them and you see the interesting pattern arises. For example, if I take identify pearls, making ornaments, preparing fragrance, examining silver gold, developing medicines, knowledge of metallurgy. All this put together is Rasa Shastra. Rasa Shastra is the chemistry and metallurgy. Now you can see Rasa Shastra becomes a major discipline in Indian knowledge system. We'll see that what it is. Then if you take Sangit Vadya, Pushpastaran, Udakavadyam and all that, these are all visual and performing arts. Then if you take all these related to food preparations, bed preparations and all that, Keshamardana, These are all beauty, food, and hospitality skills. Then if you take, this is something which I want to tell you. These are now an example from beauty, food, and hospitality. This was very important. Now, right in the beginning, I said that, look, what did we eat in the past? Is there any documentation? Now, this is not written in any of those 18 Vidyas. But when it comes to this 64 Kalas, some people started writing books on that. And there is one book called Manasollas. This is the 12th century text. It's Sanskrit. And this was written by King Someshwara. And he was from the Chalukya dynasty. Now, why I have brought it here is this book is compilation of preparations in the king's kitchen. So this is the first book on preparations in the world, and this has been accepted. This is Mary Ellen, a culinary historian. She wrote a book. He said, a century before cookbook writing began in medieval Europe, King Someshwara III described the dishes cooked in the palace kitchen at his capital, Kalyani, in India. So the first cookery book in the world is from India. We do not know. Now, you go onto the internet, write that Manasol Lasa. Manasol Lasa in Mana is Ulasa is happiness, happiness. And that's the book is. And it gives you all the preparation. Those preparations are vegetarian preparations, those are non-vegetarian preparations, and everything. So let's not be under the impression that Indians were only vegetarians. No, they used to eat non-vegetarian food, and all that, those preparations, they are documented in Manasolas. Then if you take another set of things, these are all technical skills. And then if you collect this Manasi, Stambhikaran, Sutra Kridam, and all that, these are the cognitive and psychological skills. So this is what we done. And there is also descriptions of various skills those existed in India, and I'm bringing to you from writings of Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, and he identified three. Vardhaki is a person, is a carpenter, shipbuilder, cart maker. So these skills existed in a traditional form. Kammara is a metal craftsman who could make a plowshare or iron house, down to a razor, or finest of a needle which could float on water, and so on and so forth. And then Prasanna Potaka is a term for a mason who would do quarrying and shaping of the stone. So these are all the skills which existed in the Indian system. Now we can ask a question that these 18 Vidyas and 64 Kalas, the 64 Kalas we grouped and said these were the aspects of the knowledge. Is that the complete story of the Indian knowledge system? So what we do here, we take a 5 minutes break, and I'll also have some tea, and then you can also have tea, and then we'll meet and complete this story.
Sure, sir. Yes, sir. So shall we go ahead?
Yeah. So let's start. So we discussed 18 Vidyas and 64 Kalas. And asked a question, is this the complete story? What has happened to those uh, traditional knowledge, what we were talking about? So now let's start looking at it. Indian agriculture. Now this is something which is very noteworthy, that Indians developed agriculture years, 1,000 years ago. And India, you'll be surprised to know, I just brought one picture. India has over 20,000 rice varieties. So this many varieties we have this. You can see the different colors, right? From black, white, red, and all that. So this is this knowledge is not written. It's in the public. And many of the varieties we are losing because recently some groups have started working on it, NGOs, and they are collecting the information, the traditional rice varieties. So this is one which comes from the traditional. Now, Indians had developed water conservation and water management system, and through which they developed hydrological and hydraulic related science. Harappan civilization was the first one, but importantly, the Mauryan civilization, the world knows it as the first hydraulic civilization. We'll see something little bit. And any empire in India, which lived for more than 200, 300 years, they understood the importance of water, like Cholas, Kakatiyas, also the Maratha Empire, later times, and developed various ways of water conservation and management systems. Today, we have 20 traditional water conservation systems, traditional. And they also form part of the traditional knowledge. How did they do that? The textile. You have seen this picture many times. This is from the Indus Valley civilization. And this cloak, what this person is wearing, is a cloth. In fact, weaving, spinning started in the Indus Valley civilization. That is about 2000 years BC. Another proof for that is, this Egyptian mummies, they're wrapped in the fine quality cotton, which used to come from Indus Valley civilization or from India. And textile manufacturing was a great thing in it. And Indian fabric was traded all over the world because the high quality fabric, exclusive designs, and the natural and bright dye stuff. Also, Indians use large variety of fabric. See, the muslin from Dhaka was of 4 types: Malmal, Daria, Charkhana, Jamdani. And there were 17 types of Malmal and 10 types of Daria and Jamdani. From where do you get this information? That also I'll tell. This was never written down by Indians. When the British came to India, they started documenting this. So, Imperial Gazetteer of India, this was written around 1890, volume 3. It reports 300 fiber yielding plants in India. Of this, about 100 or more or less regularly used by people, and 10 to 12 were established for the articles of trade. Now, which are these 10 to 12? Fiber yielding cotton is one, maybe you can add silk. Which are these 12? 10 to 12. Very difficult. So there were some others the Indians were using. Now, Let me connect it with the story. So this is what happened. As I said in the beginning, the Malmal from Dhaka was lost 200 years ago. And we Indians kept on saying, oh, that Dhaka Malmal was lost. It was a great fabric, great fabric. None of us asked a question for 200 years that if the art of weaving that Malmal is lost, can I recreate it? Such questions don't come to Indians. One British fellow asked this question, can I make Malmal? So he started going around near Dhaka, asked people, do they know? But 200 years is too long a time. Nobody knew anything. But some Malmal was available in the British Museum. What he first found is that normal cloth, what we use today, in 1 square inch, you have got 100 by 100 threads. Whereas Malmal had 1200 by 1200 threads. So that sort of fine thread they could make. And that fine thread cannot be made with cotton. So this person again started searching in the museum of Europe. And in one museum, he found leaf of a plant that yielded the fiber for Malmal. So he did the DNA analysis, and from the DNA matching, he fixed up a plant which has a very similar DNA fingerprints, grew that plant, got the thread out of it. You see, this is what is the issue. We don't ask questions. So that particular thing is one more fiber now we know that the Indians used to use. Now let me switch gears and say, we know this Ramappa temple. This is a 13th century temple, and year before last, it received the World Heritage Site. Now, what is so special about it? It uses two technologies. One is the sandbox technology. The pillars of this temple are embedded in the sandbox so that the temple is safe even if there is earthquake. The sand will absorb the shocks. Second thing it does is a floating brick technology. In order to reduce the load on the pillars, the bricks which are used for the top of this Kalasha, they are lightweight. Their density is 0.9. They float on water. The density of normal bricks is 2.2. So such lightweight bricks were used so that load can be reduced. Now this is a new civil engineering that was started in 13th century, but it was not written, not documented. So we will classify it as traditional. I talked about the shipbuilding. Now there are plenty of evidences that we had very healthy shipbuilding industry. This is a mural in Ajanta caves. It shows Indian ship, and this is first, second century coin of Satavahanas, where the ship is depicted. And there are many things what Indians did. For example, Lothal is the earliest dock in the history of man. That's about 2,200 years. Now there is a museum coming there. The imperial Cholas, they built ships of 75 tons, 10th century. Maratha Navy, they built ships over 200 tons in the 17th century. And 18th, 19th century, Indians made huge ships for the British East India. So that's the tradition what we had. And the first book on shipbuilding is by Raja Bhoj. And the name of the book is Yukti Kalpataru. This was written 1000 to 1050 BC. One qualification I should give you is that Indians built ships which were stitched ships. They never used nails. That means the planks were stitched together so that there is a flexibility in the design. If you nail it, then it becomes rigid. And this particular technology they developed because Arabian Sea is very rough. And therefore, if the ship can little bit adjust itself, then it is safe and comfortable. So they use stitch ships. Now there is a big project these days going on under the government of India that can we replicate those stitch ships and make voyage from India to Java, Bali, Sumatra, and so on and so forth. Very interesting. This is not in those 18 Vidyas. This is coming from, not also coming from the 64 Kalas. These are all independent developments which took place. Now, the trade and commerce, we can see that we had a very organized way of conducting trade. And that information comes from the Sangama literature. That's from Tamil Nadu. And one thing that you should know is that this system also had a banking system. And so let's not think that the banks were brought by British. And this, all that trade and commerce had very little government control. So this is what it is. Then the Indians traded to the northern sea. So you can see on the west coast of India, there were several ports. And from there, the Indian traders used to go all the way through the Arabian Gulf and then go up to Rome. And there are documented evidences that some enterprising businessman from South India took a peacock all the way to Rome. So that trade existed. Now there are archaeological, there is another one, is the East trade from the East Coast. You can see here that in the previous slide, all that trade used to take place from the West Coast. So even Chinese goods, they used to come to the East Coast of India, and from there they were exported. So in retaliation, the Chinese developed this Silk Route, and some of these stations were connected to the Silk Road. Because of the Silk Road, these people from the East Coast, those lost their importance. So what Cholas did, they developed the Eastern Silk Road, Sea Silk Road. And during that process, they conquered this Far East, the Southeast nation countries. And this is what you see are the Sri Vijaya Empire and so on and so forth. And that is what they did. So trade, commerce, and the politics were all together there. Also, we also have the archaeological evidences where the Romans used to trade with the South India. So there are the warehouses. This is the Roman warehouse, which is in Archimedo, which is near Pondicherry. And there you also find the Roman coins and so on and so forth. And these Romans, they were called Yavanas. They also were part of the king's army in South India and so on. So the trade relations, military relations existed. So somebody tells that Vasco da Gama was the first European to come to India, it's blatantly lie. The trade relations were there 200 years BC. Now, if you start combining this, so what is useful for us today to teach our students? The astronomy and mathematics, you can get it from the Vedanga. Ayurveda, architecture, politics, and economics, they're from Upraveda. Ayurveda is architecture from Stapatya Veda, politics and economics from Kautilya's Arthashastra. Philosophy and logic we pick up from Nyaya and Darshanas. The 64 kalas, we get chemistry, metallurgy, technical arts, cognitive and psychological skills, visual and performing arts, beauty and hospitality skills. And much part of from the traditional knowledge, we get agriculture, water management, shipbuilding, trade and commerce, textile, civil engineering. So this is just to name a few of the disciplines that we get. Now, in Maharashtra, it is said that in the first year, you have a generic Indian knowledge system. In the second year, you teach a subject-specific form. So, commerce student, you have to teach trade and commerce, what happened in the Indian system. So, it is there. You can cover all that material. If a student is from agricultural sciences, they get it. Chemistry, metallurgy student can talk from this. Mathematics, the philosophy, logic, you can teach. So practically everything you can have a parallel in the Indian system, except, to be careful here, somebody will ask, what do I teach to a computer science student? Well, the computers did not exist that time. So you can teach some part of the complex mathematics there. But otherwise, anything that you can pick up, there is an Indian system there. So that is the way one has to transit from generic IKS to the subject specific IKS. So now we have come to the subject specific. And here I'm going to take just one example. Let me tell you about the chemistry and metallurgy. We had a very, very long tradition. And Indian system, we have these 6 pramans, out of which now since we are going to talk about science, chemistry and metallurgy, we'll take only 2 pramans, pratyaksha and anubhav. So either I need to see it or I have to infer. Now this in the modern context mean using these 6 steps. Archaeology is direct, that you see something like the iron pillar of Delhi. It exists, it's an ancient one. So I must get information that is through archaeology. If I go through the ancient manuscripts, I will get some information and some description will be there. Third one is very important, historical documentation. See, India was not an isolated country. Many visitors from abroad used to come, heard about Yuan Sang and so on and so forth, and they have written their travelogue in which they have described what they saw in India. So these are the historical documentation. Then we also look for remnant practices. See, knowledge in a society is never lost completely, even after 2000, 3000 years. Some part of it remains in the society. So these are called the remnant practices. So we should see that. And if nothing else is there, then go to the ancient script. They have given a procedure. You work out that procedure in the laboratory and say that this exists. So there are 5 proofs that you can use. They are pratyaksha or anubhav, which we are going to use. So let me start describing to you. In chemistry and metallurgy, this is a Rasashastra. There are several manuscripts independently written on this subject. Now, the whole development of chemistry and metallurgy, we divide it into some 5 periods. One is the Vedic period, which is primarily dealing with some medicinal practices and metallurgical practices. 600 BC to 800 CE, this period is called Ayurvedic period, in which a lot of Rasa Shastra in terms of the medicinal system is developed. And you can see here the scientists and the books they have written. Charaka is Charaka Samhita. Or Umaswati, you can see here. Varahamita. Brass Samhita also has a lot of chemical knowledge. Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Kautilya's Arthashastra also contains some lot of chemistry. Then there comes a transitional period, 800 to 1100 CE. Why it is called transitional? See, until this period, the Ayurvedic medicines used to be derived from the plants. Then the practice of using metallic oxides, metallic sulfides started. So there was a transition. So that is the transitional period. And this is where the typical word rasa starts coming in the literature. You can see Nagarjuna, rasa Naga. In the Tantric period, you see now Rasa Shastra, Rasa Ratna Samchaya, Rasanu, Rasa Hridaya, everything related to the chemicals, Rasa. Now, what is this Tantric period? This is also a very interesting period in the chemistry metallurgy development. This is where the Tantric cult got established in India. And this Tantric people, they were worshippers of Shiva and Parvati, and they used chemistry and metallurgy to worship Shiva. So chemistry metallurgy was used as a means to worship. One of the examples I can give you that the Tantric people wanted to make Shivalinga of mercury. Now, mercury cannot is a liquid, so they developed the amalgams. You can mix mercury with copper, make amalgam. It looks like mercury, and then shape it like Shivalinga. So all that chemistry they done. And you can see here all those books, manuscripts, they have got all that rasa. The reason for this is rasa in Sanskrit means rasayana, but rasa is also a word used for mercury. So all these books give description of various chemicals, including mercury. And then there is iatrochemical period, 1300 to 1550, where all those things which were developed in tantric period were used for benefit. And again, there are lots of manuscripts, and you can see here beautiful names: Rasaraja Lakshmi, Rasasara, Rasendra Chintamani. You can see the beautiful names: Dhatu Kriya, Arka Prakasha. Arka is another word for chemical. Rasa Kaumudi, Rasa Pradipha. Now, this forms an independent part of the Indian knowledge system. All those descriptions exist. Those descriptions do not exist in that 18 Vidyas. Now, let's look at the iron pillar. Now, we say that this iron does not rust. Then ask a question, why it does not rust? The reason is, if you look at the composition of this iron, it is a pure wrought iron, but it contains 0.114% phosphorus. And that makes it non-rusting. That small amount of phosphorus and iron forms iron phosphide. And that iron phosphide, suppose if you scratch this particular iron, then iron phosphide will spread around that scratch and it will protect it from rusting. So this is what was developed. Now you ask the question, when was it developed? There is a historical documentation. You know, in the 4th century, Alexander invaded India. And you know the story about Alexander and King Puru. And when they had a settlement, the King Puru presented to Alexander 30 pounds of iron, Indian steel. And who recorded it? The Quintus Curtius, who traveled along with. He recorded it, so it's a historical documentation. Now, this rustless iron is not only in that. You can see here on the left the iron pillars of Dhar. They're also now extinct. Then you have the Sun Temple, 12th century. The iron beams used there are non-corrosive. And the Mokambika Temple, this is near Bangalore. They have iron pillar built around 2nd to 6th century. It does not. So you can see this particular technology existed in North, South, Middle East, and everywhere, Central India, and also South. So we have the archaeological probes. Then we ask a question, are there remnant practices? Yes. There are Adivasis in Central India who make their iron in a traditional. They don't buy it from us. And those groups are Asur, Brijiyas, Agariyas, Lohar. They use traditional practices for iron smelting. You can see their furnace. Now you can, if you have this furnace with you, then you can ask, how do they do that? And establish the science. So this is a typically the furnace they have. What they use is iron ore and a wood charcoal. So wood charcoal can give you temperature only about 1000 to 1200 degrees centigrade. Whereas the melting point of iron is 1540 degrees. Now you can see here that in this furnace, iron does not melt because melting point is 1540 and the temperature available there is 1000 to 1200. So what this process is the solid state reduction, in which the charcoal reacts with oxygen, forms carbon monoxide, it reduces iron oxide to iron. At the same time, there is a lot of silica in the ore. That silica interacts with iron and forms iron silicate, which is low melting. So what you get in this process is iron and liquid slag, which is iron silicate. So what these Adivasis do is take out those iron pieces and hammer them. Now you understand why they hammer it. They hammer it so that that liquid slag, the iron silicate, escapes out of it. And finally, you get a rock. So now you can validate this beautifully. Now, this particular process is very important. This iron made by the ancient Indian practices does not rust, and people have been interested. Now, I'm showing you a reference of a paper published in 2021. The title of the paper is Uncovering the Superior Corrosion Resistance of Iron Made via Ancient Indian Iron Making Practices. And who is doing this work? Curtin University, Perth, Australia, Australian Centre for Neutron Scattering, School of Molecular and Life Sciences, Curtin Institute of Functional Molecules. These are all people from Australia. We are not interested. We say, oh, India had developed that rustless iron, but we don't want to do research. So others are, thankfully. Now, UGC also says that teachers should be sensitized on the wood still. So Indians made steel, and this is called wood steel or crucible steel, which is ultra high carbon steel, 1 to 2% carbon. And it exhibits super elastic properties, and therefore this material was exported to Damascus, Syria, and Europe for making those famous Damascus swords. And the process they used was take the wrought iron and seal with the wood chips and heat in the charcoal fire. The iron will absorb some carbon from the wood chips and it will become steel. This process was adopted by D. Mouchet in 1800 and he took a patent. See, we are so happy that We are great, but we don't worry about our knowledge. Now, let me skip this. The wood steel was a very advanced material. This process originated in South India in 500 BC. And from 600 to 1700 AD, this material was exported to Arab world and Europe for making those Damascus swords. And this has been mentioned by Hamza, all those scholars from Arabia. In 1700, Westerners started taking interest. And this Benjamin Anne was a botanist. He was wandering into the jungles of South India. At some place, he found the Indians were making some steel. So he asked them, "What are you making?" So those people said, "We are making uku." Uku in South India means carbon steel. He heard it as words and he gave that name as a wood steel. And then the Europeans started sending those samples to Royal Society of Chemistry for analyzing and all that thing. And they started doing research. And finally, they took patent on wood steel. The Indians also developed a lot of apparatus for doing chemistry, metallurgy, out of which two are very important. Tiryakapatana or Koshti yantram, which is downward distillation. And this downward distillation method was not only used for distilling liquids, but also metallic liquids. Ancient India, they used to extract zinc at Zawar. And there was an international team. They investigated it and they found the mines in Zawar carbon dating 2000 to 2500 AO. And nearby, they found zinc smelting processes. You can see that there is a structure here. More details you can see in this paper. Now here, what you have is a retort. It's a clay retort in which you have the ore, zinc ore, and then you add those reducing agents. In practice, it would look like this. And this retort were organized 6 by 6. That is what you can see here. So this is called Koshti. So the total 36 retorts. Typical temperature, again, wood charcoal temperature, 1200 degrees maximum. This whole furnace is closed, so low oxygen pressure. You operate it for 5 hours. Then one koshti will give you 7 to 8 kgs of zinc metal. And around this mine, there is a debris of 1 lakh tons. Sorry, debris of this clay retorts. From where you can back estimate that these guys here produce about 1 lakh tons of zinc. So it is like an industrial scale production that the Indians were doing. And here also the story is different. This knowledge was taken to Britain, and William Champion, he established the same technology at Bristol using the downward distillation method, Savar. So you can see now the process for zinc smelting is given in Rasaratna Samhita. I'll not read it out for you. I'll give you some translation. Musham musho pari nyasya karaparam pradhameta. Musha is a crucible. Keep one musha on another musha. Kharparam is calamine, that's the zinc ore. And then you light it. What happens is, Kharpare prajwalate jwala bhave nila sitar. So initially the flame will be blue, and when your process of reduction is over, that flame will turn white. Then you say your product is ready. Now there is very straightforward that if you have got low oxygen vapor pressure, partial pressure, then you'll produce carbon monoxide. And all of us know carbon monoxide burns with a blue flame. And when all that carbon monoxide reduces or the calamine or carburum, then the carbon monoxide will be consumed, zinc will be produced, and zinc will give white flame. And that is the time your product is over. So all those observations are all given. They are as per what you expect today. And then you can see Indians gave zinc to the world. And therefore, the brass is also given by India. And you can see a lot of new things. You can understand that in 15th century, 16th century, Portuguese took up Indian zinc technology to China. And then we also know that in 1740, William Champion adopted this technology. Now, this is very interesting that when the Portuguese took zinc technology to China, most likely they took it from South India. The reason is, those days, China exported zinc to Europe under the name Totamo or Tutenaga. Now, this is derived from Tathanaga, that is the word for zinc in South India. So you see the cultural interactions. There are lots of chemical sciences you learn from those. Now here is one which we teach our students, electrochemical series. Rasayanava was written around 12th century. Suvarnam, Rajatam, Tamram, Tikshnam, Bangam, Bhajangamam. Suvarna is gold, Rajatam is silver, Tamram is copper, iron is Tikshnam, Mangam is tin, and Bhujangam is lead. Their resistance to rusting is in the order they have been quoted here. So gold has the highest resistance for rusting, and Bhujangam, lead, has the least resistance. Also, you can see the reaction of sulfur with the metals, and it is done in such a poetic manner that sulfur is like lion, and it can kill any metal. So you can see, and also the flame test what we use in the school chemistry practicals. This is given in the Saranpa. This is 12th century text. The colors of the flames, gold gives yellow flame, silver gives white flame, so on and so forth. And you can see over the years from 2500 how Indians developed this chemistry and metallurgy. The important things are, you can see here, copper smelting, iron technology, glass making. That's happened 1500 to 800. Then 600 to 400 BC, brass, steel, colored glasses. Then this we talked about 400 BC, King Puru presents steel to Alexander. Then laws of combination. Then iron pillar was made in 370 to 375 CE. It was originally fabricated at Mathura, and then it was shifted to Delhi. Another interesting thing is the statue of Gautam Buddha, which is pure copper, 99.7% pure copper. And this is weighing about a ton. This was made around 580. Unfortunately, this statue is in Birmingham Museum. 600 CE, we talked about the wood steel, how it was exported, extraction of zinc, paper making, then 1100 to 1200 soap, indelible ink. Indians were first to produce sulfuric acid. Indians were first to extract antimony, and so on and so forth. So you can see a lot of things first in the book. And Indians were expert chemists and metallurgists. and they were ahead of their counterparts anywhere in the world. Now, I'm coming towards the end of this presentation and I'm going to ask some questions. Those questions are, there exists that ancient wisdom. Now, ancient wisdom was from the practical knowledge, what they saw, what they experienced. Now, using the modern science, can we help that ancient wisdom and bridge the gap? I just give you one example, and that example is that of turmeric. See, turmeric has been quoted so much in the Indian health medicinal practices, right from Ashtanga Sangra. And it is said to be a treatment for all metabolic disorders like diabetes. Now, modern science tells us that turmeric has got this composition. And most important one is the curcumin. And this curcumin is useful as anti-arthritic, anti-diabetic. It's also chemopreventive. It's used for wound healing. And you can see all kinds of clinical tests have happened using the modern technique. One important thing that you should note here is turmeric or curcumin is not to be taken as a medicine, but it's the one which prevents diabetes. So it's like this, after diabetes, you take curcumin, is not going to be useful. You should continuously take curcumin every day. Then it is anti-arthritic, anti-diabetic. So in the sense that it is a preventive medicine. That's the way the terminology is. Now, you will be asking a question that Indians eat turmeric by tons every year. Everything we add healthy. So why do we see that diabetic and cardiovascular diseases in India? Now, there is a way the ancient practices tell us how to take turmeric. The best way of taking turmeric is to put it in milk. Now, what does milk do? Curcumin, which is the active reagent in haldi, is water insoluble. It does not dissolve in water. So even if you take 1 ton of curcumin, it will not dissolve in your body fluids. It will be just excreted and body cannot use it. In science, we call it as a bioavailability. Its bioavailability is almost. But if you mix it with milk, then the proteins and fats in the milk help curcumin to dissolve. And then it becomes bioavailable. So that's the standard practice that is used in ancient India. So now today is a modern world. So we say that why people should take turmeric and dissolve it milk. We will extract curcumin out of the haldi, active, and mix it with some fats and proteins. It should be good. So that is what we did. Now this is called intervention of modern science into the ancient practices. You take dry plant, extract, and then add some fats and proteins and make something. And that, if you take 1 spoon, about 200 milligrams of bioavailable curcumin will be available to the body. And this is what we take it to the industry and say that, look, you can now start marketing it. Now, many of you would also want to know that where do we get this information now if I want to teach something to the students. And for that, 3 years ago, Honorable Prime Minister, he said that we should validate these Indian practices and make them known to the public. So there was an initiative which was made called Swastik, nothing to do with that Swastik, as per scientifically validated scientific traditional Indian knowledge. It's a short form of that. Now, in this, we validate practices and make them available to public. So also have podcasts and also have lectures. So you can see this. It is available on Swastik platform. Also, it is connected to MyGov. Now, currently, we are doing it in 16 Indian languages. And in MyGov, its reach is over 40 million. So you can see the kind of reach we are having. Now, I'll tell you a few things what we have brought out for the public. Some of you may know that in Kerala, they make Arnamula Kannadi mirror. It's a metal mirror and it's a front reflecting mirror. It is made up of certain alloy and it is polished using some nanoparticles and all that. And it has got a reflectivity better than the standard mirror. So this is a technique which came in Kerala around 15th, 16th century. You look at Ayurveda or any of those medicinal practices, Shushruta Samhita or Agnivesha Charaka Samhita, there are certain plants which are used for kidney disorders. And brought to you some pictures. This is Bhuyavla. Now this plant will be seen everywhere. Underneath this leaf, there are small globules, and this comes during monsoon. Then this is Daru Harida. This is Pashana Vitta, Gokshura, Guduchi. Now, the real thing is that you should do the chemistry of it. So you extract, like I said, from haldi, you extract the curcumin. So from here, you can extract the active chemical and then use it. And this has been done. And this medicine is available in the market. Kalamega is another medicine which is used. Again, this is used in diarrhea, fever, or liver disorders. Again, you can do the same thing that you extract through active reagent and make a chemical. Now, I'll just give you one example of practices, agricultural practices. This is rice called Samba Mosna, which is grown in Tamil Nadu. And why I brought to you is this: the Samba Mosanam rice is used is in the Siddha medicine system. So one is curious to know what is this. And if you do the analysis of this rice, then you find this is the only rice which is rich in zinc. And we have that experience of COVID-19 to increase the body stamina, body resistance, to take the Zinkovich, that is zinc supplement. So this is the one which has got that zinc component. I talked about Mauryan Empire. This is the water conservation system, but the Mauryans developed. This is called Ahar Paine system, water conservation. The Mauryans also developed rain gauges. They used to measure rain. Like today, we measure rain and say this is so many centimeters and all that. Mauryans adopted exactly the same procedure, except that they took a stone and had a hole in it. And measuring that water, they used to document how much rain was. And there were certain dimensions, 7.4 inches depth, 9-inch diameter hole in a stone block. And this was called Rolu. So Rolu was the ancient rain gauge. Also, you can see that Mauryans developed air coolers. They were, of course, manual operated and they were called Varyantras. Just lastly, give you some example. In August 2022, there was an article in Journal of Sports Medicine This comes from UK. How a 2-minute walk after meals can help lower type 2 diabetes risk. And what this paper says is after having food, you walk for 2 to 5 minutes, a light walk. It helps to smoothen out the postprandial glucose level. So I read this article and I said that look, in Maharashtra, there is a tradition of taking Shatabhavali. After food, you walk 100 steps. And these fellows are not saying anything different. But where is the documented evidence? So the documented evidence is in Shushruta Samhita. And what this is? Tata pada shatam gatva. So after food, you sit for a while like a king and then walk 100 steps. Now you see, the knowledge existed in our system. So what is the difference between this and this? Our system knowledge existed, but we never validated it. We simply believed in it. What is validation, which was done by this scientist? You have two groups. One group walks after food, other group does not walk. Then you take the sugar levels, do this experiment over 6 months, get the statistics, and conclusively prove that 2 to 5 minutes walk helps to reduce the glucose level in the blood. This is called validation. In India, we have knowledge, all that thing, but we have never validated. We said, Shushruta Samhita said it, and therefore it must be true. Shabda Pramana. And that is how we go in our approach to life. Now, finally, I have to talk a little bit about multilingualism. So I'll take about 20 minutes. Now, this is something interesting. And I'll motivate it like this. What is multilingualism? Multilingualism is any society, institution, group, or individual, those who can operate with more than one language in everyday life. Okay, so that is multilingualism. So it is the knowledge of more than one language. And multilingual education means any academic program in which more than one language is used in the curriculum to teach non-language academic subject. So if you non-language means science, history, geography, or all that, if you take recourse to more than one language, then that education becomes multilingual education. Now, why these things have become important? So that is, we take the world perspective. In the world, 43% people are bilingual. 17% of the world is multilingual. And 40% population is monolingual. So now you can see that 60% people in the world speak more than one language. And they're bilingual or multilingual. Whereas the monolingual population is in minority, so only 40%. So we must respect that multilingualism. But this multilingualism in the world has come up because of two reasons. One is historic multilingualism. That historically, certain countries, certain regions are multilingual. For example, this multilingualism is a part of history and culture of that particular. India, we have many languages. We have states, they have got state languages. Historically, they have the border people, they speak both languages. So that is, if you go in Sangli, then they speak Marathi as well as Kannada. So this is how it. So that's the historical reason. Switzerland, German, French, Italian, and Romanesque, they speak all four languages. It's a historic. the cultural part. Hong Kong, because of the history, they speak two languages, Chinese and English. So this is the historic multilingualism. This has to be treated in a different way. But there is current multilingualism. This is because of the migration. And this sort of multilingualism you find in the United States, Canada, or UK, where lots of Asians and people from other they have migrated, and there are different language groups, so they have a multilingual population. Now, these two issues have to be understood separately. And in India, it is a historical multilingualism. Therefore, it has to be operated in a different way. So let's start picking up some ideas about this, how the educational programs run in these multilingual societies. Now, let's take the observations from current multilingualism. Now, there are some observations, and these are very important observations. The first observation is first generation migrant children with no initial competence in the host country language require 3 to 5 years to acquire basic interpersonal competence skill and 5 to 7 years to acquire cognitive academic language proficiency. So 3 to 5 years those children take to understand the language and communicate, but to use it in academics, in the study, they take 5 to 7 years. Now, corollary of that is that suppose somebody's mother tongue is Marathi, and you say that no, I want to teach him or her in English, then remember that person is going to take about 5 to 7 years to acquire cognitive academic English proficiency. And that's too long a period. So this is what we should understand. The second observation they have is proficiency in reading and writing in the home language and the host language correlate with the academic achievements. This is an important thing, that the proficiency in both the languages is important. So if there is if the student is taught, let's say, Marathi and English, then if you take the overall performance of the children, those students who are good in both the languages, their academic achievements are higher. The reason for that will come later. At primary education level, proficiency in L1, that is the home language, is a predictor of L2 literacy. See, this is something what we do not appreciate. Suppose if I have got Marathi and English, if I am teaching these two languages to a child, if the child is good in Marathi, then he will be certainly good in English. If he is not good in Marathi, his proficiency in English is debatable. See, there is no point in just saying that we are going to teach somebody in only in Marathi. If you want the child to appreciate English, he or she should be good in Marathi. And finally, L1 medium of instruction in the rural primary school context lead to better academic performance than L2 medium. So that is what we always say, that we should teach our students in the mother tongue. So this is also NEP 2020 adopts this from the observation of the multilingual by migration. Now let's come to the historic multilingualism. They have different observations. Now this is a case study from Hong Kong where we have children in the English medium instruction or Chinese medium instruction. There are two different instructions which are used. Now, the observations are there was no significant difference between English medium instruction and Chinese medium instruction in achievement in maths. So whether you instruct a child in English or Chinese, there is no difference in achievement in maths. Then second one, which correlates with the earlier observations, the Chinese medium instructed students perform significantly better in science, history, and geography. So this is another observation which correlates with the earlier observation on this. But then they had another observation which is important is English medium instructed students had higher learning motivation than the Chinese medium instructors. So now all this tells us that yes, we should indeed teach our students in the local language, in their mother tongue, but we should also promote them to learn a bit of English. The reason is the English instructed students have a higher learning motivation. And why? That we understand. For example, I take the case of Kazakhstan. They use three languages: Kazakh, Russian, and English. And this is their education minister said. Kazakhstan must be regarded as a highly educated country in the world, the population of which speaks three languages: Kazakh as a state language, Russian as a language of international communication, and English as a language of successful integration into the global economics. This is the reason why English instructed students have a higher motivation. So we should not deny this to our other students, that English is indeed a language for integrating with the global economics. So we should keep this in mind. Now let's put this picture for India, the multilingualism in India. Now in rural India, 22% are bilingual, 5% are trilingual, and only 3% are English speakers. That means this 22% and 5%, this multilingual population, one of the language is not English. So English is not part of that multilingual. Whereas in other countries, English is a part of the multilingual. That's in Europe, they will speak English as well as French. In Canada, there are French, English, and so on and so forth. So English is a part of the multilingual. Whereas in rural India, English is not part of the multilingualism. So you've got to be careful. What about urban India? Oh, you should also ask this question that 22% are bilingual. These are the border people, like I said in Sami. 5% are trilingual. These are people on the confluence of three states. In urban India, 44% are bilingual, 15% are trilingual, 52% of the urban youth are bilingual, and in urban India, 87.6% are English speakers. What this means is English is a part of a multilingual. So now we got to treat the rural India and urban India on a different footing. Wherever there is English is a part of multilingualism, we can treat in different way. In rural India, we have to treat in a different way. My take on this subject is, see what that education minister of Kazakhstan said. The Kazakhstan must be regarded as a country in the world, the population of which speaks three languages: Kazakh as a state language, Russian as a language of international, and English as a language of successful integration into global economics. Can we say that India must be regarded as a highly educated country in the world with the home language as the state language, Hindi as a language of national communication, and English as a language for successful integration into the global economy. If you do that, then our students will be benefited. So let's not have a very myopic view, but also be broadened. Today, the international opportunities will come through English. Now, there are plenty of advantages of multilingualism, multilingual education in India. The multilingual people have a higher cognitive development because they can switch from one language to the other language. So they have got that memory, attention, problem solving, creativity is much higher in people who know more than. So many scientists know more than one language. So they have a highly developed brain. It helps. It improves academic achievements, as we have seen that knowing language L1 helps to know the language L2 better. And those who are taught in mother tongue in the initial stages of education, they do better than the foreign language. Now, for a country like India, the cultural diversity, we need to expose our students to the cultural diversity. And this cultural diversity is a part of the 21st century skills. So it develops the intercultural competences. It promotes social inclusion so that irrespective of the language, the members of the society can have access to education, enhancing human capital. This is one thing I always ask is that in Maharashtra, if we teach our students engineering in Marathi, and if there is a job opportunity in Gujarat, how that student can compete? So there has to be some way of addressing this issue. So people who know more than one language, they hold with them higher human capital. Another important thing for India is to preserve the linguistic diversity. And this is a very serious question, that serious aspect that we need to consider. There is a study which showed that in next 50 years, many of the Indian languages will remain as oral languages, not written languages. You know why does it happen? In my generation, I worked in Marathi. In my children, they speak in Marathi, but they don't read Marathi, they don't write Marathi. In the next generation, it will remain only as a verbal language. It will stay as it is. Now, a language which has been developed over thousands of years, these languages will die. Now, will we do that? This has to be prevented, and therefore the languages have to be preserved. And this is the responsibility that lies on us. And in the Indian context, it can strengthen the national unity. If people know many languages, then people will develop respect and all. So the multilingualism is an important issue. If Canada and United States are worrying about the multilingualism only because the people from other nations are coming to them, and if they are using their language in the initial part of the education, why do we not do it when the languages that we are is a part of our history and culture? These are the questions, and therefore we should make efforts to promote education in the mother tongue with the understanding that will also promote English, and we also understand from analysis if the person is good in his own language, he will pick up English far better than the person who does not have proficiency in his own language. So it helps both the languages. That is the way we have to look at it. Now, there are lots of preferences on the multilingualism and all that. A lot of studies have happened. You can have a look at it. And with this, I will close this presentation. So we have some time, about 20 minutes, where I can take some questions.
I request participants to please unmute yourself if you have any questions. The platform is open for question and answers.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes. So this is Professor Ganesh from Kekewa College. We
Yeah.
started autonomy in the last academic year, and first time we introduced the IKS Indian Knowledge System in the first year as a generic course. I taught that course personally. I took that inspiration from B. Mahadevan lecture.
Yeah, continue.
What I feel during the teaching this course to the undergraduate students, as they are not aware about these all languages in the first to 10. Okay, so some are in Sanskrit. Okay, and that many students are not opted that language, and again they show the less interest regarding that terminologies which are used in these Indian knowledge systems. Okay. So, is there any plan of the government to inculcate this from the first standard itself? Okay, so that in curriculum in first standard itself, so that they will get a major awareness while coming to the engineering.
Yeah, I mean, look at this. While teaching Indian knowledge system, the student does not require a background in Sanskrit. It just does not require. It is for the teacher to explain the content, what is there in the Indian knowledge. See, there is no point in reciting shlokas, verses. What do people understand? Now, I showed you some chemistry tags. Swaranam Rajatam Tamam. ठीक है, if the student does not understand Sanskrit, so what? I have told him the meaning, that this is what it is. And this verse says that this is nothing but the electrochemical series. The student will understand. See, the question is that we should not become too Puritan. For example, when I talk about, I showed you some compilation of verses for the zinc extraction. I don't think my students should know about it. They should know that what is the science they developed and how they developed it, how they tested it. That's all what is required. See, if I have to teach Srimad Bhagavad Gita, I will not insist that my students should know Sanskrit. Why they should know? I should be in a position to take the essence of Srimad Bhagavad Gita to my student. You see, there is who was that? I think that was our great Vinoba Bhave. Okay, Vinoba Bhave was asked, "What is Gita?" And Vinoba Bhave said, "You read it in the reverse way. It is tagi. It tells you, you tyag karo, renounce." Look, this is a simple way of taking forward the philosophy. See, Vinoba Bhave did not recite all the 18 adhyayas. See, this is what it is. The essence of Gita is this. What is the essence of this? This is this. This is what we should take. I don't think our students should be taught. And about Sanskrit, yes, until fifth standard, there are only play activities and then the languages will be introduced. Sanskrit can be taken as one of the languages. Yes, that is possible. But if the student does not take it, no harm. Those who have got interest can do it later. But we should give them the fundamental ideas, basic ideas. We talked about Max Muller. Max Muller came to India and learned Sanskrit at a very ripe age. He did not learn it in the childhood. The Prince, Prince, a British officer, not exposed to any Indian language, only because he saw those inscriptions. Those happened to be in Brahmi. He also did not know Brahmi. He figured out what is that, and he deciphered all those Shilalekha of Ashoka. So people can learn it at any stage. And this is what is advocated by NEP. Look, there is a very important statement in NEP that curriculum load should be reduced to make way for critical thinking. If you teach your students how to do critical thinking, they will learn everything by themselves. You don't have to teach them. I also take one course on this particular thing on the holistic education. See, what is NEP saying is that whatever education system we have so far, it is teacher-centric education system. We should change it to student-centric education system. Slowly that has to happen. So let's not think that we will teach everything to our students. They will learn. And we want them to be lifelong learners. And that's why, that holistic education says learning to learn. We should teach a student how to learn. Then he will learn himself. Why should I teach him? See, these are the subtle aspects of the policy. And we should do it like that. Rather than loading a student with, say, I keep hearing that, the periodic table is removed. So I would ask a question that if I have taught my student how the electrons fill in S and P shell, can you not write the periodic table? If he thinks these are the elements where S is filled, these are the elements in P is filled, this is where D is filled, this is where F is filled. Can he not segregate those elements and arrange in some way? He himself will make periodic table. Why should I teach him? This is that strength of critical thinking. This is what NEP again and again says, that this is what we should see. I'm today sitting in the Skill University, Maharashtra. We were debating on what sort of skills are going to be useful in next 5 years. Well, you can list. But my take on the subject is, while I will help you to make the case, I will teach my students 3 things: the critical thinking, problem solving, and entrepreneurial spirit. If my student has 3, he will identify an opportunity in the society and he will progress. I don't have to teach ye computer wala karo, ya coding ka karo, ya kuch ye karo. That student, if he has a critical thinking, he can learn it by himself. And another statement I made, that 90% jobs in this country require training for 3 months. Only 10% jobs require training for 2 years. And that is where everybody wants to compete. See, that there is a changing platform in which new ideas have to come. We have to get rid of those old things that we want to teach everything to our students. My approach has been this, and my interpretation.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for enlightening this. Thank you, sir.
Participants, do we have any more questions? So I think there are no more questions. So shall we conclude the session?
Yeah.
Okay. So I take this privilege. I'm Mayuri Deepak Kave, Assistant Professor in TS Modern College of Engineering, to conclude this beautiful session. Ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude this insightful online session on Indian knowledge system and multilingualism, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed speaker, Dr. B.N. Jagtap sir, for sharing the richness and diversity of perspectives. The session has underscored the importance of preserving and promoting IKS while embracing the cultural wealth embedded in multilingualism. Let us carry forward the momentum from today's dialogue to foster greater appreciation and integration of Indian knowledge and languages into our global discourse. Together, we can strive towards a more inclusive and equitable future where all voices and traditions are valued. Thank you to our speaker once again, participants and organizers for contributing to this meaningful exchange. Thank you so much. I declare this meeting is concluded.
Thank you very much and all the best to everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.